How do you make thin brows to be a little bit thicker, not too thick, so that way it looks more natural? And how do you make it to stay on all day? Hey everybody, it's Jasmine, your brow expert. Thank you so much for joining me. So today's another thin eyebrow to go a little bit fuller. Now, a lot of the times I get asked by so many of you, what about people with no eyebrows? I do have some brow models that I've used that went through alopecia, chemo, and lost all their hairs. So I don't get many of those models. And when I do, I have to hope that they agree to allow me to use them as a model as well. So, which is why most of the time their eyes are closed. Are you guys ready for the model? So thin eyebrows, she's Asian, so she's would stand to be a little bit fuller and straighter, but anyone is going to benefit from these tips. I'm going to be using the Dip Brow Pomade, which is why it's going to last all day. It can get a little drying. Some of you have asked me, how do you loosen my pomade because it's gotten very dry? I like to use a hydrating oil. Anastasia Beverly Hills has a hydrating oil that doesn't leave the product oily. Very, very important. Right here is also very important because what I like to do is use a pro pencil. You can use a concealer, anything to create a border, especially when you're using like a pomade, something that's creamy or wet. This really helps to create that border. It helps you to see your eyebrows even better. It makes them a little fuller, but most importantly, it allows you to be a little generous with the pomade without worrying too much about it getting all over the place. So just try to do something like this. My brows are tattooed. It's been tattooed a long time ago, which is why it already looks like it's kind of done. So, you know, on the model, I'm using I believe it was ash brown. You can use ash brown. I'm using granite. You can use many different types of colors that obviously will suit you. I suggest if you're my coloring ash brown or granite. On her, the ash brown, most people would be better off with taupe or medium brown. That's a very good universal color. So a tiny bit will go a long way, as you can see right here. Now you have the border on the top. You can see even on my eyebrows, the top area. This makes the brows look actually a little bit darker and fuller just by the highlighter, right? Okay, so I'm using a thin angle brush. I believe it's 14. Make sure you use the brush always for just the wet creamy product. You notice that I went right in the middle to the end first, below the eyebrows. Actually, it's right at that border where the highlighter meets with the where the highlighter is. So it's kind of inside the highlighters, which is why it's important. Notice that I'm dragging the brush up because I'm just getting that background without pressing too hard. Now, the Dip Brow pomades can get very dark. It can get very intense, which is why you start at the middle to the end and then work your way towards the front, because that's when the product gets, you get rid of it, most of it in the middle. And so, again, it's staying within the highlighter. So just press very lightly, and I'm just going, again, just a little, again, look at this. It's starting at the middle of the eyebrows with very medium to light pressure. The harder you press, you get all these streaks. The lighter you press, you get just enough color. And the pomades can be like a powder. Treat it like a powder because you're not getting that much. You're getting a tiny bit. And the highlighters really help create that border. Like I said, let me show you again, just right over here. I don't know if I put enough on here, but as I'm doing this, I want you to look at the model so that way you see my border. It's just getting rid of a lot of the color in the middle to the end of the eyebrow, but I don't have that much color on the brush, just a tiny bit. You can always go back to I like to use my hand sometimes too. When you're using a pomade, you can use your hand. Now, I'm using the powder as well because the powder can add that extra kind of, it could tone down the pomade. If you find that it's gotten too much, that's when you pat it. Make sure you use a separate brush for that because the brush for the powder is 7B and you don't want to use the same brush, obviously. One's wet, the other's dry. If you pat some powder over the pomade, it actually tones down the pomade if you feel like it's gotten too intense. So just patting some powder over the pomade really will, again, help tone it down. And I'm just going to go, and the brush 18 is everything in this case, because like I said, if it can get a little messy, you just go around the eyebrows. I didn't do a lot on myself because I really want you to pay attention to the model by just going with the brush just around it. It really just cleans it up. Now, if you haven't used the pomade, you can, or if you do and you know how messy it can get, that's why this brush is really important. But the highlighter and the pomade is everything in this video, because the highlighter, again, is just, I call it a highlighter, but it's a pro pencil eyeshadow base. It really just sets the whole area because it creates that border. I'm not going to blend mine in too much because I want you to see that border above and below the eyebrows. Mine obviously is a little bit wider because I have fuller eyebrows. Well, fuller tattoo eyebrows, that is. But you notice that I stuck in keeping the brows straight, but a little bit thicker. Make sure you have a clean spoolie brush on hand because you really want to blend that through. Okay, so just going real quickly with the pomade. I use my hands sometimes because if it can get a little drying, if you don't have like a hydrating oil, you use your hand to warm up the product. And I'm just going always at the end, middle and the end, middle and the end. Whatever's left over, that's when you go up in the front. So this is a pretty quick video because there's so much to it. So I just want to make sure that you go back and forth too. You can go back and forth with the pomade, with the powder, so that way you get it as natural as possible. The beautiful thing about this whole brow application is that you created that border around, and then you're just going inside. That border at the top and down below. You really just stay inside that guideline of the highlighter and down below. And again, whatever's left on that brush, the pomade that's when you go up in the front and just brush it up. I'm getting very messy now here. So that way you get really a good idea. If you brush it up, you allow the background to get in there without being too heavy. Now, I have other videos where you can get really fancy with the hair strokes, but this is really just getting the color on there without overly doing it. And the pomades can do that. So that's why I just say to focus in the middle to the end, and then whatever's left, that's when you go up in the front. That's when you go up in the front. And you notice how I'm holding the brush this way, this way. So that way you're giving yourself more of a background without being too heavy. So this is one of my favorite before and afters because the after isn't so like wide and thick and unrealistic. The important thing about this after is that it's realistic. And one thing I really want you to see from the before and after on this video is that most of the adjustment was below the eyebrows. So if you could clearly see the before brow line, right? What you're doing is just going underneath that brow line, underneath and following the natural shape. You're not like, oh, how should I do the shape? Just let the brush guide and just go around underneath your brow line. Okay, and then you could build inside. But again, I can't stress this enough. It's all about that highlighter. Go underneath, and then keep the color inside that highlighter. And if it gets to be too wide or too dark, that's when you grab the spoolie and you just comb it and tone it down. Very, very important. So that's why these two products, the pomade and the highlighter, is going to be the best marriage. The highlighter at the top is always going to be something I'm going to stress because especially if you're trying to learn your eyebrows, filling them in, that is, or you're trying to get them fuller, this will do that. And then of course the brush will just blend everything together, or use your finger. You know, I often say, you know, sometimes I'll just grab my finger and just blend that out. And like I said earlier about it being a great marriage together is that when you create a concealer border, it really allows you to do your thing with the dip brow without feeling like you're doing too much. And again, little goes a long way. And the powder is optional. I didn't say this earlier, but it's just something that you may want to just dab on the pomade to tone down, because pomades, even though if you use a light application, you don't press that hard, the creamy part of the texture makes the color go on a little bit on the darker side. So the creaminess on your skin might feel like it's a little too much. That's why you spoolie the brows out, and that's why you can dab a little bit of powder. Powdery brows give always that little bit more of a natural look, if you will. So let me know if you tried this tip. Let me know if you like this video. Obviously, by liking and commenting, that kind of engagement helps me. I will tag all the products including my lipstick. I actually mixed my lip gloss and a matte lipstick together. Sometimes I do that. Thank you for subscribing, and I will see you guys next week.